Ever wonder how World War II exploded into a truly global conflict, engulfing both Europe and Asia in flames? It wasn't just one big event, but two separate conflicts that eventually merged into one catastrophic war. Let's rewind the clock and untangle the threads that connected these two vast battlefields. Most of us know the story starts in Europe. On September 1st, 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland. This was the final straw for Britain and France, who declared war on Germany 2 days later. But the seeds of this conflict were planted much earlier, in the ashes of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, meant to bring peace, instead sowed resentment. Germany was crippled by war reparations and stripped of territory, creating a fertile ground for extremist ideologies. Enter Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. They rose to power on a wave of nationalism and a promise to restore German greatness. Hitler began systematically dismantling the Treaty of Versailles. In 1936, he reoccupied the Rhineland. Then, in 1938, he annexed Austria in the Anschluss, and later that year, the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. European leaders, haunted by the memory of the First World War, pursued a policy of appeasement, hoping to avoid another major conflict by giving in to Hitler's demands. But this only emboldened him. When he signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union and invaded Poland, the illusion of peace was shattered for good. Europe was at war. But while all this was unfolding, a storm was brewing on the other side of the world. In Asia, the Empire of Japan had its own expansionist ambitions. Japan was a rapidly industrializing nation, but it lacked the natural resources needed to fuel its growth, like oil and rubber. Looking at its neighbors, particularly a weak and fragmented China, Japan saw a solution. Their aggression began long before Germany's. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, a resource-rich region in northeastern China, and established a puppet state called Manchukuo. The international community, preoccupied with the Great Depression, offered little more than condemnation. This inaction signaled to Japan that it could act with impunity. In 1937, a minor clash between Japanese and Chinese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge near Beijing escalated into a full-scale invasion of China. This marked the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War, a brutal conflict that would become the main theater of war in the Pacific for years. Cities like Shanghai and Nanjing fell, with the latter suffering a horrific massacre. The fighting in China was incredibly vicious and resulted in millions of casualties, yet it often gets overshadowed by the events in Europe. For the Chinese people, World War II had already begun. So, for a couple of years, we have two separate, massive wars raging on opposite ends of the globe. In Europe, Germany's blitzkrieg tactics were overwhelming its neighbors. Poland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France all fell in rapid succession. Britain stood alone, heroically defending itself during the Battle of Britain. In 1941, Hitler made a fateful decision. He broke his pact with Stalin and launched a massive invasion of the Soviet Union, opening up the vast and bloody Eastern Front. Meanwhile, in Asia, Japan was bogged down in a seemingly endless war in China. To break the stalemate and secure the resources it desperately needed, Japan's military leadership began looking south, towards the European colonies in Southeast Asia, French Indochina, the Dutch East Indies, and British Malaya. These territories were rich in oil, rubber, and tin. So how did these two separate wars finally connect? The key lies in the alliances. In September 1940, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed a tripartite pact. This created the Axis powers. The pact was primarily a defensive alliance, stating that if any of the signatories were attacked by a power not already involved in the war, the others would come to their aid. The unspoken target of this pact was the United States. The United States had been officially neutral, but was increasingly concerned by Axis aggression. President Franklin D. Roosevelt saw the danger posed by both Germany and Japan. He began providing aid to the Allied powers, including Britain and China, through programs like the Lend-Lease Act, becoming what he called the arsenal of democracy. Japan's ambition to seize Southeast Asia put it on a direct collision course with the United States. America responded to Japan's occupation of French Indochina by imposing a crippling oil embargo. This was a critical blow. Japan's war machine and its entire economy would grind to a halt without oil. Faced with a choice between withdrawing from China and abandoning its imperial ambitions, or going to war with the United States to seize the oil fields of the Dutch East Indies. Japan chose war. The connection was finally, and violently, forged on December 7, 1941. Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, in Hawaii. The goal was to cripple the American Navy in a single blow, giving Japan free rein to conquer Southeast Asia. The very next day, the United States declared war on Japan. Because of the Tripartite Pact, Germany and Italy were obligated to support their ally. On December 11th, they declared war on the United States. Suddenly, the regional conflicts in Europe and Asia were no longer separate. They had merged into a single, global conflict. The United States was now fighting a two-front war against Germany and Italy in Europe and North Africa, and against Japan in the Pacific. What followed was a titanic struggle that spanned the globe. In Europe, the tide began to turn with the Soviet victory at Stalingrad and the Allied D-Day landings in Normandy. In the Pacific, the U.S. Navy, after recovering from Pearl Harbor, began a long and bloody island-hopping campaign, pushing Japanese forces back towards their home islands. The war in Europe ended in May 1945 with Germany's surrender. But in the Pacific, Japan fought on fiercely. The war finally came to a devastating end in August 1945, after the United States dropped atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, leading to Japan's unconditional surrender. So, you see, World War II wasn't a single event, but a convergence of ambitions, ideologies, and desperation. The embers of World War I ignited the fire in Europe, while Japan's quest for resources and empire set Asia ablaze. These two fires burned separately for years, until the attack on Pearl Harbor and the subsequent declarations of war acted as a fire merging them into one giant, global inferno. It's a powerful reminder of how interconnected our world is, and how conflicts in one region can have devastating consequences for the entire planet. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through history interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. See you next time.